It was nearly a year ago that I read the great Brazilian master Joaquim Maria Machado de Assis for the first time, his posthumous Memoirs of Cubas, a life-changing book that I still count among one of the greatest I've ever read, and have read multiple times over, in fact, in the last year. So the next place I wanted to go was the book he published 10 years after, Quincas Borba. Published in its final form, I should say, because it was in 1886, 5 years after Brás Cubas, that it began to appear serialized in a women's magazine of all things. A very strange happenstance for a book named after the mad philosopher who was a friend to Brás Cubas. And this book, I believe, Quincas Borba, is a more subtle, a more challenging, it demands more from the reader's imagination and connecting the dots. And I guess if I really had to say, I think a more rewarding and rich and deeper experience than Brás Cubas. And don't get me wrong, I love both equally at this point, but for very different reasons. They're very different books. And I will admit right away that about 80% of the way through my first read of Quincas Borba, I'll say the afterword, well, first of all, getting to the end, it's one of those books where you hit the end and you immediately go back through the whole book, and it's the last, it's the last like 80 pages that make you question everything you thought about the book up to that point. And you start going back and trying to find things that you missed and connect dots and look for connections. And then there's a beautiful afterword in this Library of Latin America edition, really well written, that explores a lot of the themes and brought a lot more things to light. So I had thought about delaying this video until I'd really developed some more ideas of what I wanted to talk about, but you can only capture that pure first impression experience once. And so while this isn't exactly pure, since I read that afterward, and I've listened to about half of the audiobook in a different translation, which is by this Margaret Jewel Acosta and Robin Patterson, who are the translators that I read for Brás Cubas, but they've really recently released a Quincas Borba edition. So go ahead, if you've checked that out, let me know what you think of it, which translation you like better. Right now I can say this older one, this Library of Latin America, is a Gregory Rabassa translation. There are moments in each translation that I feel are done better than the other. So right now I'm kind of half and half, but I haven't listened to the entirety of the newer one. So anyway, yeah, 80% of the book through, I had no idea what to make of it. Let me set the stage. Rubião is I guess, the closest thing to a protagonist we have here. He inherits a fortune from the mad philosopher Quincas Borba with the condition that he must take care of Quincas Borba's dog, who is also named Quincas Borba. And there is some hint here at a sort of, not reincarnation, but a transmigration of the soul. But that is, of course, up to the reader to decide. But it is so different than Brás Cubas. It is so different because you have a third-person narrator who we never really know who it is, but they break the fourth wall constantly. Are we listening to Machado de Assis himself here? Or is this narrator yet another character? We don't know that. And he's addressing a couple times throughout the books, he addresses us as ladies, maybe because this was serialized in a women's magazine, or was it an intentional part of the way this is constructed? I don't know, because the final edition was heavily edited and crafted before it came out in 1891. 10 years after Brás Cubas, so it's difficult to say, but we have this detached third-person narrator. We only get glimpses into different characters' heads, and these glimpses don't provide a linear narrative of what's going on like we get in the first-person narrative of Cubas. It is so wildly different, the experience of reading these two books, and really just elevates my admiration at the genius of Machado de Assis, his ability to craft different, these really original and really different kinds of books. So 80% of the way through Quincas Borba, it's just this, Rubião, he's basically going from this rural village, or this rural town, town in a rural area of Brazil, Minas Gerais, goes to the capital, Rio, and for context, this takes place in 1870s to 1860s, 1870s Brazil, so, it's 20 years before it was actually published, at least. And in the time, actually, between these two books, it's important to note, slavery was abolished in Brazil, and there was a big, break from their monarchic past. I don't really know a whole lot about that, but it was mentioned in the afterwards, so I won't talk too much about that. But, yeah, we're in the 1860s, 70s, Brazil here, and so the capital is Rio de Janeiro. Rubião takes this fortune he just inherited from this mad philosopher and the dog to Rio to go and live among the upper class, to live the high life in Rio de Janeiro. To the victor the potatoes, he's carrying this mantra with him. This humanitas, it's a bizarre thing. The philosophy of Quincas Borba, which was expounded in Brás Cubas, more humanitism or humanitas, I originally took to be like a satire of specifically Western philosophy and how philosophies are kind of created in general and the gap between them and reality. But, maybe that's a very simplistic reading. Quincas Borba is a much more complex and rich exploration of things under a very... the surface makes it so not obvious, though. You don't even understand how complex this book is until the final chapters, the final 20% of the book. But I keep getting distracted. So Rubião goes to Rio to live among the high life, and he's got some friends, and he spends most of the book trying to court this woman, Sophia, who is the wife of his friend and business partner, Palia. And so Sophia is just as much a main character as Rubião, or Rubião, I think is actually the pronunciation. And we also get some other sort of love triangles, but it's so banal. The life, Rubião living among this upper class is just this, and there's mentions kind of to here and there to slavery. There's one moment in the book where he actually witnesses the execution of a man in the streets. There's sort of these things that happen. Rubião, there's one moment where he saves a boy from getting run over by a carriage. It's just this stream of events and this stream of different kind of hopping into different characters' heads as this third-person narrator. But this third-person narrator is connecting none of the dots for us, is giving us none of the important details of what's actually happening. And you're gonna have no idea what I'm talking about until you get to the end of this book or read an analysis of it. And I frankly don't want to spoil it, because that's the fun of this book is not figuring stuff out until the end. I mean, you can try as you're going through and maybe have some ideas, but it doesn't become clear. The emotional weight of the book all comes in the last, 1/5 of it. So it's just an incredibly hard book to talk about, and I'm trying to preserve something of that emotional experience. And so in the end, it's can I compare and say which of these two books is greater, Quincas Borba or Posthumous Memoirs of Brás Cubas? There is a statement in Quincas Borba that the constellation of the Southern Cross. Okay, so it's to get into the details of this book. It's like either I'm giving away too much or I don't know. But there's a statement in this book that the entire book, the narrator breaks the fourth wall. The third person narrator breaks the fourth wall and tells us there are only 4 or 5 situations in this book that keep on repeating themselves. Like, don't you get it, reader? He's actually a bit pedantic to us as the readers, to be honest. And that's why I think this is a character, this narrator is a character that Machado has created, and it's kind of a commentary on being aware of the own narrative that's actually being omitted. The narrator is unreliable because you start to get the sense that this third-person narrator who's breaking the fourth wall is purposely withholding important details and important connections and like being pedantic to the reader about it. and it's marvelous. It's so different from Cubas, but brilliantly done. And so he's saying these 4 or 5 situations are repeating themselves over in the book, and one of the most important symbols in the book is the Southern Cross, the constellation in the sky. I looked up, wait a second, how many stars are in the Southern Cross? And the Google response I get is, depending who you ask, there are 4 or 5. It was like, oh, I get what he's doing here. Okay. And yeah, so again, I really don't want to go into a whole analysis and spoil this book. I'm giddy with how brilliant that moment when you think it's like, for most of the book, you think it's not going to be that great, or you don't get it. But then the ending just starts to unravel all these threads for you, and the book opens up, and you like just immediately want to reread it and multiple times and uncover everything. And what is it that allowed me to do that? It's the trust that I had in Machado de Assis's genius that Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas gave me, because reading this book, I thought, this is so banal, this is so strange, this is so bizarre. It was published serialized in a women's magazine, and it seems like it's like there's some love triangles and things like you'd find in references to like popular fiction in Brazil, but like, and maybe this is a bad stereotype on my part, but it's just not what I imagined, as some like. Then why do you need the whole mad philosopher and the Quincas, Borba and the Rubiao stuff, if that was the intention? So like after reading Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas, I had such faith in Machado de Assis that everything he was doing in Quincas Borba was intentional, and it absolutely delivered in the final parts of the book. And so I wholeheartedly recommend it. It's hard to recommend it to somebody who hasn't already read Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas, mostly because I feel that there is that need, like, to really trust the author. But if you can go into Quincas Borba and you haven't read Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas and just aren't interested because you've already heard too many people recommend it to you, and you're just like, I know how it is. Like, so many people recommend this book, and then you just like don't even want to read it. Well, you can be a hipster and go pick up Quincas Borba and trust that it's going to be amazing. Read it to the end. Read the afterword, the brilliant afterword, and be like, nah, Quincas Borba is the true classic here. This is the book written for the real readers, right? You can do that. So, Quincas Borba, freaking amazing book. An amazing masterpiece of world literature. It's one of the best I've ever read, and it is right up there with Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas. And yeah, gonna be reading more Machado de Assis, hopefully the rest of my life. But I don't know how many more actual videos I'll do on it, but he's just cemented as for me one of the greatest authors ever, and just original and there are so many themes that connect to Cubas, but this is another, and I think this is telling. Like when I did my video on the Magic Mountain, there was so much that I could get into, so much I want to talk about, analyzing, and all I could do was a 15 minute video just expressing the hype. No, not the hype, but just the profound how profoundly the book spoke to me, and not spoke to me, but how much was in it, how much I felt there was to explore in it, that needed to be done later when I had more time. And it's going to definitely be after this Reading the World project, but I feel the same way about Quincas Borba. And I didn't even, I sort of felt that way about Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas, but after reading Posthumous Memoirs a few times, I kind of feel like, well, it, I could analyze this book and I could not, and it would be okay. Quincas Borba for me has just, and these two kind of go together, right? I honestly do feel like you can't really analyze one without understanding the other. They feel like a pair of connected books. Quincas Borba is like a spiritual sequel, I guess you could say, but it also is technically a sequel. And yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.